do you all remember that classic Christmas movie, A Christmas Story, where we get to see a little boy named Ralphie actively pursuing a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas? He's grown up in the 1940s or possibly 50s. I didn't research that part. The whole point is this: as I watched that movie this year, I found myself identifying with Ralphie's curmudgeonly old dad. Now, whatever that says about me, there's this one scene where Ralphie's dad emerges from the basement with black smoke billowing behind him as he has been a cussin' and a fussin' and fighting with the furnace downstairs. We also get to see him proudly replace fuses quickly, trying to quickly change the tire on the car. It's a classic moment. And all of these things that go along with a person in the 1940s and 50s trying to make things work, because even when they worked, they were kind of broken when you compare them with some of the things today. Even when the furnace worked, you were probably kind of colder than you are today with the internal heating we have. I can adjust the heating on an app on my phone in my home and make it pretty much to the comfort level we would like to have. I'll tell you in a second where that factors in for today's show. Today we're going to be talking about the holidays, and more specifically, sobriety and treatment and maintaining health throughout the holidays. Now, we live in a list-based culture that often lists these exact things in every website and every newspaper, and they like to post something about being mentally and psychologically healthy for the holidays. Because of that, we're going a little bit deeper and trying to talk about some of the internal and underlying motivations and things that kind of help. The holidays is a very stressful time, and one of the stresses is the pressure to have joy, to enjoy, and for everything to kind of be good all the time. So just like Ralphie's family and all the people back then, everything isn't good all the time, and it isn't comfortable all the time, even when a lot of things are working. And trying to have some kind of balance of that is really what we're going to be talking about. So let's join the conversation as we are beginning about what is going to be helpful this particular year. Claire, what do you think about this topic of the holidays? Where should we start out?
Everybody talks about it every year. I think especially this year is a very critical time for many people.
Well, I think that's a great point. And that's what maybe we should start by getting into that, of what is going on this year. I mean, everything bad has increased. Maybe not everything, but the drug abuse, alcohol use, domestic violence, a lot of those things. And then also just the fear of withdrawals. There's a lot of things that are kind of different this holiday, I think.
The other years, we talk about unrealistic expectations about the year to come, financial difficulties, due to the time of the year, loneliness, if there is an addiction issue and not being with, the ones you love, or the expectation of what's going to be when I get together with the family. A lot of the stressors that the holiday season already brings, I think this year, especially 2020, you can multiply by 100 because
it is amplified. Yeah,
the unrealistic expectations really became no expectations. We have no idea what's coming.
No, exactly. I have a neighbor who every year in the neighborhood, they ask everybody, instead of doing like neighborhood gifts of drop-offs of treats and things, they say, come give us canned food. They do a food bank run every year. It's their tradition. And then you just put a little thing up on your door that says, please don't give me a gift. Take this to the so-and-sos instead. And it's a great tradition. But one of the things that was up this year is there's a 300% increase in need at food banks that they're reporting. And these are only, I mean, any food bank will tell you, they're only supplemental. Right, they are not able to feed all of the need that's there, and so that right there, there's a lot of desperation and fear that will cause.
And I think the biggest fear is not knowing when this is going to turn around, not having some perspective of what's going to happen to all of us and what the new normal is going to be. So it's I think is the unknown is what's causing most people hopelessness and desperation.
Yeah, and those drive at the same time. They both drive the need, the feel of the need for addiction and dependence. They fuel the use of substances and make people, go out and get them more, and then there's more risk, and at the same time less resources. And so when addiction will pull, I mean, traditionally people who get sober, it's one of their big regrets a lot of times is I spent so much time and money procuring and making it happen so that I could be high, so that I could be altered. I think this time, especially when the resources are already so low, that you see people react varied ways to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that, most people that are dealing with an addiction, they do suffer from compulsive behaviors because, they have unhealthy ways of coping. They have with distress, they don't have the mechanisms to deal with, distressful or unwanted feelings. Mm-hmm. So being in the place we are right now and feeling the responsibility of being joyful in the holidays, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard because, you see the lights and you feel like you should be feeling one way, and it makes you feel exactly the opposite. Yeah. So, it's for those that used to have the holiday blues, I think now they have the holiday desperation, Yeah,
there's that. There's nothing that feels so bad that shame can't make it feel even worse, right?
Correct.
If I'm ashamed that Correct. I don't feel joy, and I'm ashamed I can't get into the spirit of the season, and then that makes it feel even more obligatory and feel worse.
Yeah, and but I feel there is a lack of positive messages out there. I feel, especially social media, the media has grown to be, our source of hopelessness, our mm-hmm. source of anger, our source of negativeness through our lives. Yeah. And I think that has to change. We have so many ways to get to people and help, not change, but help how they're feeling. As much as we can see everything dark, because a lot of bad things has happened this year. And I think it has happened in a lot of ways that is not just the virus itself. I think the virus aggravated people's health, people's mental health, physical health. A lot of people passed for a number of different reasons. I think a lot of people suffer financial ruin. With that said, we made it. The ones that are here right now and are listening to us, they made it. And more than ever, being in control of your physical health and even your mental health, being able to have options to change that, it's a gift that we have been given. We need to change the message. We need to stop with the anger, with feeling down, feeling victims, feeling powerless. I think we need to feel blessed and grateful in spite of a horrible year.
It's interesting how when we talk about how social media and the websites we go to, right, there's algorithms that will target what we look at and give us more of what it thinks we want. And everybody always talks about that in terms of political point of view, that everyone's in their bubble, left wing, right wing, whatever. And I don't hear as many people talking about what if I'm, not only concerned one way or the other, what if I'm scared? What if I'm sad? And I'm reading things about how scared and how sad I should be. It's going to feed me more of that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the flip side of that is we don't think about kind of how to manipulate that the other way and say, if I can find things inspiring to me, the algorithms will try to feed me more of that too. But, we don't think about it that way. We just usually talk about it politically.
I think we don't recognize that, but people are longing for it.
as you put it, the kind of the how to deal with the holidays. People talk about that every year, but I think already we hit one that's kind of always there, which is feel how you feel. Give yourself permission to feel down. It's okay. However you feel is all right. And the other one is maybe more specific or even more important is try to watch what you're feeding yourself media-wise. What are you ingesting kind of fear and anger and staying more away from those things that are that can be right in our face. It sounds like those are two things that would help.
I would ask David on that one. I think to be able to feel whatever you're feeling is great. I think we all have the rights to do so, but we have to be careful into the extent we're going to allow us to feel sad, feel depressed. How productive is to stay in that mode instead of looking for other things to make you feel at least a little better for even a short amount of time during the day. If that is walking around the block in the sun and looking at the trees, just to get out of that negative mode that is truly everywhere right now. I mean, just by looking at people with masks all around you, that's depressing enough. It is a reminder of how risky life has become, how in constant danger we are. Again, we need to, impose is the wrong word. We need to surround ourselves with some things that will uplift. And I think not just for our mental well-being, but this is taking such a toll physically on people. More and more I keep reading studies of things that has happened to people that were healthy, people that, did not have major medical issues, and how they decline through this year if they survived it. All that stress is affecting people, not just mentally, but their whole being is being affected.
I'm somewhat hopeful, I think partly because, at least thus far, it seems like there's vaccines that are coming out that are going to, in the next 6 months, maybe make a real difference. And so there's a potential for a recovery that seems, at this point to me, real. And I feel hopeful about that. That said, I know it's been incredibly hard on a lot of people in so many ways. I've seen it. It's really been a hard year on a lot of people. One of the things that I don't like about the media, and it's a subtle message that I see, is that no matter which side of the aisle that you're on or whatever, there's a constant message which is sort of like, it shouldn't be this way. I like the book that was written years ago by Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. He starts it off by saying life is hard. We should start by looking at that, not as a place to feel down, but as a place to square up to kind of the reality that, okay, life's hard. It's also joyful. But if we move from a place internally where this isn't necessarily easy, it actually gets easier. And I think the message that gets put out there constantly is that life shouldn't be hard, but it always has been, and it always will be. And I can tell you, the feeling that somebody's always got it better will destroy you quicker than anything. It's probably the greatest thief of joy I know is this feeling of comparison. And it's just indicative in the messaging that's out there. So I don't like that. I think it's good to sort of know that. And then you have to create a vision for yourself. You have to have some imagination, even if it's just step by step, even if it's just figuring out who you want to spend more time with, or if there's a family member who makes you feel good, or if there's something you can do for someone else, or whatever it is, just a vision, just even if it's just start small, that begins to sort of move you forward again. I think incrementally it helps a lot. Just being able to have small things that you can identify that move things forward, that are meaningful to you. Just that amount of imagination itself begins to help people, I think, feel better.
I greatly agree, and that's what I was saying. Is it's truly finding things to be grateful for, look forward to, even if it's in very, very short amounts throughout the day. I think it's incredibly important.
Well, along with that pressure that you mentioned, the pressure to be happy and super joyous, I think that contributes to kind of an all or nothing thinking. And what we're saying here, I was like, you always point this out, David, that, if we do something, it's going to make us feel better than doing nothing. But it may not make us feel all the way better, but that's not the criteria. The criteria is if I can find something to do and something that will impact it. But I think we get into that all or nothing thinking. I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm not happy, so therefore it's done, and I'm just not happy.
Even though our feelings are valid, they're not always true, right? And the idea that happiness is a criteria, that's the messaging that bothers me so much, is that, that's what addiction is in part. It's a search for happiness. There is no such thing as happiness for anybody all the time, ever. I don't care if people are honest. It's just a moving state. People are sad. They're frustrated. They feel some joy. They see something that makes them laugh. It's just this moving process. This idea of achieving a state of happiness, that'll drive addiction, right? Because there's this feeling that you're not somewhere you're supposed to be, right? And that comparison itself is a form of suffering. And so I think you have to start by a realistic understanding of what it means to be a human being, and that everybody's suffering, and comparing your suffering to others doesn't really help anybody. And but within that, we can really create and imagine. I'm probably like a broken record here, but one of the things that I have seen over decades of treating addiction and other people that are struggling in all kinds of ways, has nothing to do with addiction, is that you will see people get better as they can imagine. I mean, and I don't mean like as a slight fantasy or something. I mean, truly have a vision of themselves in which they're willing to work for. When that vision and that ability and desire to work towards something starts to take hold, you will see things in people's lives get better, right? So Einstein said it, right? If you want to see where people are headed, if you want, look at their imagination. It's what we see at our detox. When people begin to imagine themselves with a different life, they pick up the phone and call us. And all of a sudden they're sitting there, and I can tell you the people who that imagination has taken hold, who are sitting in front of me and we're doing a session, I can feel it. They don't want to talk about the addiction so much as they want to talk about the way forward in their life. And I think it's critical, and it's one of the most underestimated aspects of people getting better, whether it's with addiction or other ways.
Yeah, I love that idea of that vision, to hold that in, and it almost flips. It's almost like you're talking about in a way to stop the comparison, but flipping that in a way to also look and say that I'm doing a comparison with where I'd like to be with myself, and believing that vision can be met. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We have to be careful too of the comparison nowadays. I think, the new world with internet, I think when the three of us grew up, the comparison and the expectations were quite more realistic than they are for this new generation, for the generation of our children, because they have an instant world to compare to, where when we had, our country, now they have the world. The things that we try to achieve, we looked at our surroundings. Now their surroundings have expanded. And I think a lot of people that we see that become, they feel like failures, is because, again, their expectations are based on unrealistic views of what happiness is, that the internet and social media gives to them. And I keep bringing back the internet and social media because that's where they live most of the time. It is not,
sure, it's right
in their city.
And in many ways integrated with a lot of the things of our lives as well, depending on what we do and how we do it. It's often right there.
Correct.
Oh.
Correct.
What ideas do we have about how people shift away from that adjustment of expectations, or that, trying to embrace a different point of view. What are some ways that work to do that?
If you're asking me, I truly believe is having the right values. A lot of families lost the view of what life is, what family is, what being part of a productive society and having your responsibility to add something to it is. I think instead of feeling good, everybody wants to feel good all the time. Everybody is worried about, their emotions and what they can do. And David was just, mentioned that about, feeling good or feeling good enough.
I wonder if there's a better even term to use or a better word to use when we talk about seeking happiness, because like you say, it's not a fixed state. So what do we say? More like seeking health or seeking balance or, some other kind of tweaking that goal a little to where it's more realistic.
How about understanding sort of, the things that lead to happiness? Okay. So I heard someone define this once and I thought it was pretty good. It was when there's a cessation of pain, an increase in energy, and when we serve each other. I thought that was a really good description of happiness. And imagine if that was a criteria, because it has to do with self-care. It has to do with interactions in which we move from a place of wanting to give something to someone else and contribute. It reframes this whole idea that we're waiting for this state of mind to be brought to us that we're just somehow being deprived of, which is a very, very, it's not a healthy place. And by the way, you don't even have to worry about that. It's innate that we want to feel good anyways. It's probably the most innate thing there is. I mean, our own feelings and distress will inform us. We don't have to pursue it. We'll know. But what we need to understand is the conditions that allow for people to thrive. And then happiness comes and goes, but the ability to understand kind of what makes us feel better, that matters. And so I just, it's more how I look at it.
More of a management ongoing. And I like when you touch on that with, number one, there's those expectations of what am I really searching for? It's not a constant state. It's a fluid state. But I like a lot of the things you mentioned are things that also contribute to a deeper sense of satisfaction. Like if I'm doing for people and I feel that I am attached to them and helping them, that's a form of happiness, right? Is the satisfied feeling of like, I'm doing the things that I can do.
And look, if it's a good relationship, and look, you need to get something back in return. It's not talking about just a situation in which you're only giving. That's not good for anyone either. But the idea, right? And imagine if we had a world that was oriented towards taking care of each other. Right? I mean, imagine that compared to a world oriented towards, figuring out how we can get what we need, but rather we were a little bit more oriented towards just figuring out how to help one another. And I think it exists more. I think it exists. I think it's actually the fabric that holds our society together. From families, on down. But yeah, I think, and I think when people orient themselves towards that, I mean, ultimately needs drive everything. If you think about it, needs drive the whole world, right? So if you're meeting people's needs, your value will begin and your life will expand.
I like that idea of the expansion that you're talking about. Also because to my mind, that expansion includes all kinds of things. And I know I'm a big acceptance guy, so I was talking about feelings, but there's also the idea of trying to accept and working towards acceptance of both feelings and events to say, hey, what happens in my life happens. And then when there's that acceptance of what is, whether or not I don't have to like all of it and not all of it needs to make me happy. In fact, it won't. And embracing the idea that, I can accept all things, and then therefore they might be more tolerable or workable.
Today we do need to finish with positive message out there. David spoke about the vaccine. I think it is so important for us to realize that what has happened with this vaccine that started production as soon as the disease was found is incredible. I think that we have a solution is unheard of. A lot of different societies had to survive through pandemics without ever finding a vaccine or a solution or a cure or anything that helped them. And they had to live, through it. Again, looking at blessings or, good things around us that we are lucky enough to have to be able to live through. And this is one of them, I think, is a positive thing that we should hold on to. Mm-hmm. So I agree with David. I think in 2, 3, 4 months from now, we are going to be in the other side of this craziness, and we have to be strong and positive to, rebuild or restart or continue, or wherever we are, we're going to need to proceed. And the most important thing to look at is that we're here. We have the option. We have been given the opportunity to be here and do that. A lot of people have not.
I like that focus that you mentioned, because we're really talking about a sense of hope and also a sense of, even deeper than that, looking for the opportunities that we have. I'd like to have you mention that about if we're here, then we have an opportunity, right? We can do something.
Correct.
I think that sometimes being through and going through crisis does present opportunities. It sometimes, on a good day, we see them, and on a great day, we pursue them. On a bad day, we just think everything's terrible. And I'm one, once again, we have those moments. We have to have those terrible moments, but they lead, hopefully, to a moment of some hope for resolution, or even some resolution to say, I'm making goals and making plans. Having gone through some of this period of the struggles of being at home and trying to mitigate withdrawals or dependence, or talking to a doctor, picking up the phone, or doing Zoom sessions with a counselor, or even going to whatever it is. I think sometimes the crisis can drive a feeling of, it's time for me to go into some form of recovery. It's time for me to go into some treatment. And hopefully we see that with people.
I think people are tough and resilient overall. And I think it's important to remember that you're tough and you're resilient, and that you're going to approach life from that perspective. And then if you need help, get help. But people, I get asked at times, what's the single most, what do I do? If I want to get better, and what do I do? And I go through the four basic things that I think keep people, all of us, healthy, which is good sleep, exercise, good enough nutrition, and good experiences with people. Those are the 4 most regulating processes that there are. Okay. So if you do those 4 things in your life, you will be right. So those are the critical aspects of life, right? Good sleep, exercise, nutrition, and good experiences with people. Okay. And then beyond that, there's got to be some, vision of what's meaningful to you and what you want in your life. And, and then you work towards it. So yeah, I feel hopeful. I think I think that's an achievable thing for all of us. I know some people have poor health or this or that, so maybe I'm overstating it, but for the most part.
Yeah, within the bounds of the reality that we have, right, is trying to do those things as much as we can. And that's the idea too, is that pressure isn't to say, let me nail all those things perfectly. Well, if I have a chronic medical condition, how I fulfill those things is going to look different. But the fact that I can believe in myself that I still can do something in those areas, I think those are great areas to focus on.
Yeah, I think believing in yourself, I think what David just spoke about, being resilient, people underestimate who they are and what they are capable of. I think we have to understand that life is full of challenges. While sometimes we can't avoid, the issues that we are confronted with, we have to remain flexible. We have to be willing to adapt. We are very, very resilient, especially people that have suffered from addiction and often trauma and often challenges that maybe were not fair or were not expected, but they made it. Did they use the right coping skills? Probably not. Was what they were able to use or know at that moment to survive. This is just another challenge that we're going to just do the best we can, improve our lives on basic things that will give us the strength to reach a goal.
Thank you so much for joining us again. The Wiseman Method podcast is, of course, a production of the Wiseman Method, Clinic for Rapid Detoxification, and of Pop Collar Productions, where we help you to set up your podcast. You can learn more about the Wiseman Method at opiates.com, or you can call 1-800-423-2482. Our music for today's episode, as always, is the song Medical by Clean Mind Sounds. As was expressed in the episode today, we certainly hope that your holidays will be full of health and happiness and an appropriate balance of all those different emotions. Even if things are hard, we hope that you'll join us again soon and that you'll do all the things you can to learn and to increase the health that you can have, not only throughout this season and throughout this next year, but just in your life, because you deserve it. The show is co-hosted, of course, by myself, Claire Wiseman, and David Livingston. Until next time, make sure to continue to ask questions, because if you can find questions, you can find answers, and whenever you find answers, you can find hope. All the best. Bye-bye for now.